Hello, in this video I'm going to show you how to set up custom collision channels in the Minimap asset. This should generally improve performance across the board, especially if your scene is quite complicated with a lot of blueprints and other things going on outside the Minimap asset. Now I can't include custom channels as part of the asset because that's project specific. And this asset is designed to be able to insert it into any project without needing to start a new one. So for that reason, I can't actually include it as part of the asset itself. But it's quite easy to set up. It should only take a few minutes, and I'm going to show you how to do it now. So what it does essentially is that it's going to reduce the number of overlap events that the triggers that I use are going to generate, because it's only going to search for specific things to overlap with. So by default, the objects that have collision on them are set to world dynamic and are looking for world dynamic, which means that they're kind of scanning for many things that don't need to be scanned for. So I am going to show you, I am going to use Unreal Engine 4, but it works in Unreal Engine 5. All the windows and everything look exactly the same, so you should be able to follow on regardless of which version of Unreal you're using. So first of all, I'm going to set up some custom collision channels. So go to project settings, go to collision, and I'm going to add 3 new object channels. And you can name these whatever you want, but it's probably easy if you just follow along. So this one's called Minimap main volume, and I'm going to make it overlap. So these are all going to be overlap. So this is going to replace the world dynamic on the big volume that goes over the entire level. And then I'm going to make another object channel called Minimap player. And this is going to replace the world dynamic on the volume that's attached to the player, that as the player moves around, it detects what objects are in and out of the volume radius. And I'm going to make another one called Minimap world object. And this is going to replace the object type on the volume that's placed on objects in the world that get detected, things like NPCs and treasure chests and things like that. So I've got these 3: Minimap main volume, Minimap player, Minimap world object, and they're all set to overlap. So before I add them to the types, I'm just going to show you what the performance gains are going to be. So if I type in stat FPS, that shows the frame rate. So at the moment you see that so the frame rates are never consistent. Every time I open the project, it's a little bit different, but you see that at the moment it's running at over 100 frames on the right side. And if I move, it's going to go down to under 100, like 90 something. And that's because whenever I move, the volume that's detecting what things should be shown on the minimap, like, the NPCs and things, it's also detecting other things that it doesn't need to. It's probably detecting like the pot plants and that sign and things like that. So this should eliminate all that and make it run quite a bit faster. Depending on what project you're working on, you might not even need to do this. It's for projects generally that are sort of getting quite large that this will sort of see the most benefit from. If you have a quite small, if your spaces are quite small, you won't see as much benefit, but it's probably still worth doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the object types on these 4 blueprints. So if I open up Minimap, and you'll see that if I click on the volume trigger and go to its collision properties, you'll see at the moment it's set to object type world collision, which is quite generic. So this one I'm going to set to Minimap main volume. I'm going to set everything to ignore so that I can only turn on the ones that I need. I'm going to turn on pawn, which is going to detect the player, and it's also going to need to detect the world objects like the NPCs and things like that. So that one's done. And then I'm going to go to Minimap bounds trigger. So this is the one that's attached to the player that moves around with the player. So you're going to need to do it for both the box and the sphere. So if you go to box, again, go to collision, go to its object type, and you want this one to be the minimap player. Ignore everything, and this one only needs to detect minimap world object. And then the same thing with the sphere. So we're going to open its collision presets. You can already see that as a world dynamic, it's overlapping with all these things. So this is going to eliminate overlap events for all these things that we don't need. So we're going to change this one to minimap player. I believe it was minimap player. Yes. And turn everything off and only turn on minimap world object. So these two should be identical. Yep. So we can close that. Open minimap custom area. So the custom area is essentially like a subtype of the minimap. So it's going to have the same properties. So if we go to, and again, we have to do it on these two, the box trigger and the cylinder mesh trigger. So if we go to box trigger, go to collision, set its property type to minimap main volume, turn everything off, turn on pawn, and turn on minimap world object. And then the same thing with the cylinder mesh. So open up presets, change it to minimap main volume, ignore everything apart from pawn, and minimap world object. Make sure that these two are the same. Yes. Now, so at the moment it's detecting pawn, which the player is a type of. If your player has a custom collision type, which I know a lot of games probably will, it would be even more efficient if you ignore the pawn and make it overlap only your player, because then this will ignore like things like NPCs and things like that, because it doesn't need to, because this is already going to detect NPCs that need to be shown on the minimap. So this one is purely for the player. So if you have a custom channel for the player already, then ignore this and tick your player. And then the final thing we need to do is go to the minimap detect attachment, go to its sphere trigger. Now this is the thing that gets attached to objects in the world that need to be shown on the minimap, like NPCs and treasure chests and things like that. So go to the sphere trigger, go to its collision, and set this one to minimap world object. Ignore everything apart from, so the player needs to detect it and the minimap volume needs to detect it. So it should just be these two, so everything's off. Its type is the minimap world object, and the main volume and the player volume. So we can compile that, close that. Let's save everything. If we give that a run now, so it's running at over 100 frames, and you'll see that when I'm moving the player, it remains at over 100 frames. You can see that the minimap still works, so things are still kind of showing properly. It's essentially just doing a lot fewer overlaps, because now these minimap objects are only detecting minimap relevant objects, and it's not going to generate overlap events for things that it doesn't need to. So if you're having performance issues, give this a go. This should help out quite a bit. If it's not working or you can't get it to work, then leave a comment, or you can reach out to me on Discord. But otherwise, give that a go, and good luck. Bye.